Hello and welcome back or welcome to the channel. I'm Loudguns, and today I thought it would be cool to go back and take a proper look at the RSI Zeus series, a group of 3 ships that were announced at CitCon, which should be making their way into the verse ahead of this year's event. While Star Citizen's giants like the Javelin and the Kraken get a lot of the headlines, I think having more choice in this 2 to 4 person range is awesome, because these are the sort of pickup groups that a lot of people get on a regular basis. So if this sounds good to you, then grab a cup of tea while I roll the intro, then let's get into it. In Star Citizen lore, the Zeus MkI was one of the first ships marketed to the public, prototyped back in the 2100s and released in the 2140s. Just insert jokes here about SC's potential release date and whether this lore will need to be retconned in the future. But with terraforming technology advancing and quantum travel opening up to the masses, a ship was needed to get would-be pioneers out amongst the stars. However, now that the in-game dateline has moved on to the 2900s, it's time for the RSI Zeus to get an update, in the form of the Zeus MkII series. It keeps some of the same design language as the original with the upturned wings, and sticks to the format of a crew of 3, but it's getting a whole lot more bells and whistles as well as 3 variants dedicated to different roles in the verse. So we'll take a look at each one of these in this video. But before I go much further, it's of course time for a quick disclaimer. These ships were released as a concept during CitCon at the end of last year, and are currently only available to purchase for cold hard cash. But as ever on this channel, I like to take every opportunity to remind people that all ships will be available to buy in-game down the line. Typically, ships will be released to backers who own them for hard currency exclusively for 1 or 2 major patches. Then they make their way into the in-game ship shops. All you really need to enjoy SE is a basic starter pack. The Aurora and Mustang are the cheapest, around $45 list price, but you can sometimes find deals on other more advanced starter ships that put them not far off that amount. After this, you can get in game, earn some credits, and buy near enough everything else that's flyable. Just if you do decide to create an account, make sure you use a referral code for a few thousand additional credits to get you started. Mine's the one up on screen, but if you've got any friends who play already, please just use theirs. So when it comes to how I'm going to review the Zeus series, I'm much more interested in how it stacks up versus other ships in the weight class, things like the Cutlass series or the Crusader Spirits, and the reasons why we might look to include these ships in organisation fleets in the future when it comes to things like my Getting Organised series. So first up, let's familiarise ourselves with the 3 different variants. The Zeus MkII ES is the first variant, which places a focus on exploration, much like the original Zeus did. In terms of hardpoints, the Zeuses universally have a medium computer, 2 medium power plants and 2 medium coolers, but then different versions have different advantages elsewhere. The ES benefits from a large radar versus the medium found on the CL and MR variants, large quantum fuel tanks versus medium, and 4 medium or size 2 shields versus 3 found on the others. The radar is there to give it a massive advantage in terms of scanning and data gathering, which as SC's features get more fleshed out will be getting a proper rework, at which point I think we'll see big differences between large and medium parts in this area. The extra shields meanwhile reflect the ship's role exploring the wilder corners of space. While it might be more efficient to have a smaller number of larger shields, having a larger amount of smaller ones gives you the benefit of contingency. And this is a feature we've also seen on the Nomad, which has its 3 size 1s rather than the single size 2 found on things like the Cutlass. Once we see some of the engineering gameplay advance later this year, and parts experience wear and tear, having spare capacity when some of your parts break is likely to be really important for ships that expect to be out for longer durations. In terms of weaponry, the ES has dual size 4 guns under pilot control, and it's got an additional remote turret found on the top of the ship, which can be controlled by one of the crew with 2 size 3 weapons. Internally, there's an entrance up into the cargo hold via the rear ramp. The ES has a solid 32 SCU of cargo capacity, It's not a great deal, but it's probably enough to bring back some goodies you might find on your adventures, or to bring supplies for a long-term voyage. Moving forward, you hit a crew habitation area, and while given the small form factor of the ship, this looks relatively compact, I like that unlike its bigger brother the Connie, the Zeus has a properly separated hab area. Before you hit the bridge, there's an airlock to a side ladder access, and a room for suit lockers before you hit the side-mounted airlock. This sort of design is getting increasingly common, as from the ground up the team future-proof ship designs ahead of the introduction of factors like more realistic inventory management. And then finally we hit the cockpit, with stations for the pilot and the 2 crew. This is a universal layout across all of the Zeuses, and I generally prefer this sort of layout for a bridge designed around multiple people, still allowing the pilot to sit dead center while providing seats for the crew. And to be honest, I hope that in the future some other ships, namely the Argo Mole which I use quite a lot, get an update more along these lines than what they currently have. Next up, we've got the Zeus MkII CL, or Clipper variant, and this is the cargo variant, so while in terms of hardpoints it's not particularly special, the big news is an increase in cargo hold size to 128 SCU, making it the biggest internal cargo hold in its weight class, narrowly beating out the Freelancer Max's 120. It's worth noting that while the other variants, the ES and the MR, don't have anything under the utility items, the CL's got a size 2 tractor beam to assist with unloading and loading cargo. To make room for all the extra cargo though, the crew habitation area appears to be quite a lot more bare bones than the ES variant. I think this just speaks to the fact that space truckers would happily forgo a proper kitchen and eat MREs if it means they can squeeze in a few more boxes. The forward section of the ship though appears to be very, very similar. Then finally we've got the Zeus MkII MR variant, which focuses on bounty hunting. Now I know that I'm not really meant to have favourites, but this is my favourite. Similarly to its competitor, the Drake Cutlass Blue, the MR will have a quantum dampener on board as well as an EMP. So the dampener is not to be confused with a full quantum enforcement device like you find on the Mantis, that also includes a quantum snare allowing you to pull people out of quantum travel. The quantum dampener creates a bubble around your ship which prevents any ships entering quantum travel when they're next to you, so this way you can stop any of your quarry getting away. The MR also packs a bit more punch in the weapons department, with a second remote turret on the underside of the ship, again with 2 size 3s, and this gives each of the crews some weapons to control. Inside you're going to find the crew habitation has been squished again, but this time it's to make additional room for a full walk-in armory. The room opposite looks a bit empty on the cutaway, but it was confirmed in the Q&A that it'll house storage and armor sets. In terms of cargo, the MR has the least capacity of the 3 at 16 SCU, but the cargo hold itself makes room for prisoner transport pods, stacked on top of one another in what the devs described as a meat rack format. I'm not sure what the UEE human rights activists are going to have to say about that, but it will definitely come in handy when bounty hunting as a profession focuses a little more on the alive element of Dead or Alive. So one of the reasons I always recommend holding off on hitting buy when concept ships come out, as well as the cooling off and making sure it's not just the CitCon G&Ts talking part of it, is that shortly after the release you'll always get a Q&A, which contains some really interesting info. We've already looked at a few points which are specific to some of the variants, but I think some of the broader points are also just worth highlighting too. One of them specifically was stacking the Zeuses up against the Spirit series. And while the Zeuses pack quite a lot more in terms of components, it was confirmed that the RSI ship is likely to lose out in terms of manoeuvrability and speed versus its Crusader competitor. There was also a confirmation that all of the variants have fuel intakes capable of generating hydrogen fuel, enhancing their long-term mission credentials. So now we've taken a look at the ships, it's time to think about where they're meant to stack up compared to other ships in this weight class. And it does have to be said that compared to the likes of the Freelancers, Cutlasses and Spirits, it would seem that the Zeuses are set to outperform, even if they are a little bit slower. I think there's a bit of a trend in the way some folks look at SC, where almost all ships in a certain class need to be balanced in some form of rock, paper, scissors format. But personally, I don't think that's entirely necessary. I think it's perfectly fine for some ships to simply be better versions of other ships, as long as when we get some form of economy balancing, higher prices, UEC prices that is, are used to reflect the higher capabilities. And to my mind, it's quite logical that you would offer this kind of progression. So right now in SC, we've got a bit of a problem to my mind in that ship progression is tied to ship size, and ultimately crew size. We take mining for example, you've got a great little starter mining ship in the form of the Misk Prospector. But then if you want to increase your capability, you have to go up to a multi-crew mole, then the Arastra, then ultimately the Orion. And this leaves players who want to play solo without a logical path to follow. They kind of just get stuck in the Prospector. So looking at the Zeus MR for instance, to me this could just be a logical progression path for a 3-person bounty hunting crew. Do enough missions in your Drake Cutty Blue and you might be able to afford the upgrade to the Zeus MR. And this is kind of back to one of the things we touched on in the first part of the video. If you do always look at ships in SC through the lens of their dollar values, then it's easy to categorise new ship designs as exhibiting power creep, where with each release ships get punchier and have punchier price tags to go along with them. But if you view it through the lens of in-game purchases further down the line, then it actually starts to look more like good game design, with satisfying progression without necessarily having to find the crew for a bigger ship. Overall, this is a series I'm really looking forward to seeing in the game. The MR in particular, as you might have guessed, has caught my eye, and while I don't do a ton of combat, I think once the bounty hunting game loop is a bit more involved than go here, shoot this guy who'll wait for you as long as you like, get paid, then I'll probably be doing a lot more of it. Generally speaking, I also really like the smaller ships in SC, because I reckon as time goes on and we get more hands-on experience with things like the engineering system, people are likely to gravitate towards smaller ships that they can more effectively crew. So more choice in this 3 to 7 person range is therefore really welcome. But let me know what you think. Do any of the Zeus series stand out for you, or are you not a fan and will you be sticking to some of the other stalwarts already on offer? Just drop a comment down below to let me know. If you think I did a good job and earned it, then I would of course always appreciate a like and a subscribe. But with all that said, I'd just like to say thank you very much for sticking around to the end, and I look forward to seeing you next time.